Manager at the Alzheimer Association, where I do a lot of these education programs in collaboration with some of our community educators like Michael Greenberg. So Michael, I'll hand over to you while I set the slides up for an introduction of yourself.
Sure. Thanks, June. And thank you, Natalia, for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here to speak to your group. Name is Michael Greenberg. I'm an estate planning and elder law attorney here at the main office located in Midtown Manhattan. I'm licensed in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Florida. And I attended this event when I was in law school. When I was in law school, my father was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's at age 56. And that threw my life for a loop and my family's. And we didn't know what to do. So we attended a lecture similar to this, hosted by the Alzheimer Association Long Island, where my parents lived, in order to get a better background as to what to do and how to manage money and what the legal resources are and what the resources the Alzheimer Association has to help people in a similar situation. So not only do I do this for a living, helping families handle their finances and legal aspect, but I've dealt with this personally as well. So any questions you guys have that I'm happy to answer, you can type them at the bottom. I'm happy to stay a little bit after the talk to answer any questions you have, to go over the process and help you be a resource for anyone on this chat or anyone that watches it. I'm happy to be helpful as well. And I'll leave my contact information at the bottom, the chat area, if anybody wants to reach out to me afterwards. All right, so today's talk, Managing Money, a Caregiver's Guide to Finances. So learning objectives today, we're going to go through several things. First, describe how caregiving affects finances. It's something that people think that caregiving is just taking care of somebody, their personal well-being, going to the bathroom, feeding them food, helping them move. But there's so much more to caregiving. A lot of it has to do with the financial aspect as well, how to pay for care, how to handle their taxes, how to handle their investments. So there's a lot that goes in a caregiver besides just the actual physical care. List of legal and financial documents caregivers should put in place, right? Because there's a lot of things that have to do with how they're going to make decisions, how their money is going to be spent. And the earlier you do this, the better off you'll be. Because with Alzheimer's and like other dementias, the earlier you catch it, the early on in the prognosis, the easier it will be to come up with a plan, because they'll have more, the person who's inflicted with the disease has the ability to participate, right? They'll be able to talk to them, deal with them, get their opinions. You may be surprised what their opinions are, and that's why it's important to ask. So that's why it's important to have them involved in the process, because if you do wait too long, it's going to be very more difficult to handle the legal and financial aspects, because they'll no longer have the capacity to speak for themselves and sign for themselves and execute wills, trusts, powers of attorney, healthcare proxies, fill out Medicaid applications, or sign on behalf of themselves. So the earlier you do this, the earlier you have a legal financial plan in place, the better off everyone will be, the loved one and with the disease, as well as the caregivers and part of the care team. Prepare for useful discussions about financial decisions and planning. Right, we'll go through some ways to discuss how to have the meetings. Right, what time of day, who to be involved with the process. So it's important to identify that as well. We'll go through identify steps to lower chances of financial abuse and fraud. Right, we're dealing with people with questionable capacity or limited capacity. It's unfortunately, there are a lot of predators out there, and it's a lot easier for them to fall to fraud or other things where they wouldn't have otherwise when they had total capacity. Now that they have less capacity, they're prone to being, again, financial abuse and fraud. We'll go through ways to sort of lower the chances of that happening. And then the last part we'll go through is begin to create a backup plan in case you no longer provide care. Right? A lot of people think, well, my wife is here and she'll always be there to help me, or my daughter or my son will help me and always be there. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon for caregivers to get sick and pass away before the person with Alzheimer's dementia does. And it's one of those things we got to make sure we look out for the caregivers too and the loved ones, because if they're not around, the plans will be much more difficult to implement. So go over the costs of caregiving. Right, financial literacy is especially important for caregivers, provides them with the knowledge and skills needed to do better support themselves and others. right? A lot of times, and I'm going to generalize here, husband and wife, the husband is the one who takes care of the finances. He pays the bills, pays the taxes, pays the rent or the mortgage. They're the ones responsible. But when they get sick, the loved ones, the wife and the other loved ones, the friends have to step up and also understand what's going on. They need to have information and have the education and the background necessary in order to make informed decisions in the person's financial life. All right, let's do a little quiz here. So what percentage of caregivers have out-of-pocket costs as a result of caregiving? So the choices are 47%, 67%, 78%, and 95%. So you can write down in the chat area what you think the answer might be. All right, so June, you want to show us the answer? So the answer is 78%. That being said, I think it's closer to 95%. I don't know a single caregiver that's not paid for something as simple as a taxi ride, an Uber ride, paying for meals, buying, I don't know, extra diapers at the drugstore. So it's one of those things that I think when they probably did the survey, people didn't really think about everything. They just say, "Oh, I don't pay for necessarily the caregiver. I don't pay for the nursing home, so maybe they don't pay out of pocket." But there's so many expenses that go into caring for somebody that it really starts, and as the disease progresses, the expenses only go up from there. So impact on employment, right? Caregiving may affect employment. It affects employment, obviously, the person who's sick because they're no longer probably at work, but also the employment of the caregivers. When my dad got sick, my mom was still working. She was a dentist, and my dad was a dentist. So my dad had to retire immediately when he got diagnosed because dental malpractice insurance would not cover a gum surgeon with Alzheimer's. That makes sense, right? And for my mom, she was a dentist, and she was still practicing, but she did cut back, right? Because she couldn't work full time and help coordinate all the care and help for that my dad needed. So that obviously it affects employment, it affects the hours, and it affects the ability to retire. Right? Many caregivers reduce hours, take time off, retire early, quit their jobs. Right? It's not uncommon for that, and it's especially difficult because they retire and or cut back at a time where they need more money because caregiving costs a lot of money. So it's especially it's doubly troublesome and hurtful to a family when this happens. And it can increase debt, make it hard to save for retirement. It means cutting back on other costs, right? Increased debt, they may have to come out of their own pocket to pay for caregiving. Hard to save retirement, right? It's hard to just put more money into IRAs or 401ks or your retirement account when you're spending all this money on caregiving, care at home or care at assisted living or nursing home. Cutting back on other costs, right? Because you may not be able to go on the vacation anymore. That expensive vacation you're planning on going on your loved one may not have to cut back on that or not do that in order to pay for care or physically be there to care for a loved one.
So some of the sacrifices I've had to make financially due to having to care for my mom were things like paying for some of her care, doctor visits in some cases, clothing, to try to limit the spend down of her money. So I supplemented where I could and then retired early, which impacted my income to continue to care for her, and then looking into getting a part-time job to supplement her memory care, facility care.
All right, next we'll go through the impact on health. Right, caregiving have a major impact on caregivers' own health. Right, the caregiver might say, "Well, I don't have any more time to go to doctors. I can't go to the gym." They start eating worse because of the anxiety or depression associated with caregiving sometimes. But it's very important for the caregivers to take care of themselves because if they're not there, the loved one with Alzheimer's dementia, they're going to be in a dire situation. They're relying upon these caregivers to be there and to help them. So it's really important for the caregivers to take care of themselves too. Right? They may be putting off their own needs, right? Skipping the gyms, not skipping doctor's appointments. And those are things that are important for the longevity of a caregiver. And when caregivers don't take care of themselves, it leads to additional medical expenses, right? So maybe because the caregiver was around, the loved one was able to stay at home. But the caregiver's not around, they'll have to go to potentially a nursing facility, which can cost up to, I don't know, anywhere between $17,000 and $25,000 a month. So it's saving a lot of money on the family for the caregiver to be around and healthy. But now that the caregiver is no longer around, the sick individual with disease, unfortunately, will be forced to go to a facility they would have to have gone to otherwise. So how Alzheimer's disease affects finances. Right, there's three stages of Alzheimer's: early, middle, and late. Usually in the early stages, there's not as much care, right? The person may be able to stay at home stay at home for a while. They might be able to feed themselves and bathe themselves and move. So maybe there's not much money that needs to be spent on their care in the beginning. But as the disease progresses to the middle and late stages, sorry, that's when care needs go up. That's when caregivers need to spend more hours there. They might need to hire professional help. They might need to go into a facility. And that's in middle state stages, that's when you lack the ability that the person will not be able to take care of themselves. They need more caregiving, more hours, more money to be spent on their behalf. Individual Alzheimer's usually lasts between 4 to 8 years. Again, that's the average. My dad lived 10 years. I mean, he was young when he got it, but he lived 10 years. And I have some clients that live up to 15, 20 years with it. So you never know with this sort of disease. And that's why planning is so important, because again, caring for someone for 10 years is a lot harder than caring for someone for 4 years. And as the person progresses through the disease, care needs increase, so does the cost of care. I also say through the prognosis, a lot of times people ask me like, well, my loved one got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, can they sign legal documents? Can they do a plan? The answer is the early stages, yes. Middle stages, the early part, probably. The latter part, probably not. Late stage, no. Because in order to sign legal documents that appoint someone else to act on their behalf, they really need the capacity. And the lawyer could not in good faith say that someone who doesn't necessarily know who they are, where they are, who they're appointing, where their assets are, they would probably lack the capacity necessary to execute legal and financial documents at that point. And that's why it's so important for early planning. So early diagnosis is important, but early planning is just as important as well. Right, impact on managed money. In the beginning, people may have trouble managing their money, remembering to pay bills. That's how we sort of thought that maybe something was wrong with my dad. He just wasn't paying his bills. He wasn't paying the family bills, wasn't paying taxes on time. And we didn't necessarily think it was Alzheimer's at first. We thought maybe it was vitamin D deficiency or diabetes. But as test after test came back and finally did the PET scan on the brain, where they saw the amyloid sort of plaque on the brain stems, that's where we sort of realized that this is Alzheimer's. But yeah, oftentimes it starts with not paying bills on time. And as the disease gets worse, no longer be able to communicate their wishes, financial decisions, right? The early stages, they might still know who they are, who they're appointing, what their assets are, what their wishes are. But they're going to be able to, they'll lack the communication ability later on to express what those wishes are as the disease progresses. And early planning allows the person to participate in decisions. Right? You may think you know what your parent wants or your loved one wants, but you don't actually know unless you talk to them. And early planning allows them to say, oh, well, this is where I want to be. I want to be at home. I don't want to be in a facility. Or I want my child to make my healthcare decisions and financial decisions. I don't want my spouse to. And in order to actually understand what their wishes are, you need to meet with them and discuss it with them as early as possible. Right? It's a particularly nasty situation where as your income goes down, your expenses go up. And that's just unfortunately because, right, the loved one with Alzheimer's dementia, they have to stop working or have to cut back, and the caregivers cut back, and the expenses go up. So it's especially important, and it's a especially nasty disease for that aspect, that makes it even more important to plan.
So when we finally moved into assisted living, when we first got the cost, it was going to be $5,000 a month. When we started adding on daily medications and housekeeping and all the other things that come with it, we were quickly at $6,000 per month. In my mind, every month I was, doing the calculations of, all right, how much money does Dad have left? How long can this last? What happens when that goes away?
We'll go through some unique challenges for dementia caregivers, right? Dementia caregivers is twice the average out-of-pocket caregiving costs. This costs a lot of money for the care. 30–40% have experienced depression, right? It's really tough on somebody to see someone they loved go through this, go through the experience of not of forgetting things, of forgetting who their loved ones are, of forgetting how to do things like operate a microwave or a stove, or how to use the bathroom properly, how to shower. So it's incredibly depressing for a lot of people to go through this. I mean, I remember for my mom and myself, it was a really difficult time as my dad progressed, dealing with someone who was very independent and very strong and not be that anymore. So it's an importance that it's a unique challenge because unlike other diseases, this lasts a long time, and just you get to see their progression through it, and it's very hard on people. 44% of caregivers have anxiety, right? That makes sense. These are people that don't know what they're doing. You don't know if they're going to walk outside and start wandering. You don't know if they're going to go on a computer and start buying everything on Amazon, or they'll be taken advantage of by someone who calls. So it makes sense why someone has anxiety because, again, the person they're dealing with, their loved one, is not as predictable as they used to be and not as easy to deal with as they used to be. And last thing, women are more likely to experience the stress of caregiving, right? Because you think about the traditional family structure, husband and wife, husband gets sick, wife takes care of husband. And unfortunately, what happens is the women are the caregivers, or often, and it's not the women, often it goes down to the children. And if there are multiple children, I'm going to generalize here. If there's a daughter, the daughter is the ones who pick up most of the slack. The sons are the ones who say, sorry, Ma, sorry, Dad, I got my own family to deal with. I'm busy with work. Daughters don't do that. I mean, that's one of many reasons why be good to have a daughter, because they're more likely to take care of you when you do get sick. So unfortunately, it's especially difficult on women dealing with this disease and dealing with caregiving with someone with this disease. Right, some additional challenges. People living with younger onset Alzheimer's face additional challenges. Right, my dad's case, he had to retire early. He was 56. I mean, we expected my dad to work for, I don't know, at least another 15 years or so. And that's money that my mom and my family will never get back because wasn't able to work. So my mom had to cut back on her work. So we lost income and we lost my dad's income. So it was an especially difficult time for my family in trying to take care of him and handle the finances as well. And as a result, someone able to maximize benefits such as disability and from life protections of COBRA. Last thing, people with younger onset Alzheimer's, the care partners have less time planned for the future, including less savings, right? You have less time to add to your 401k or IRA. Less time planned for the future because you thought you had a lot more time to work. So there's some unique challenges involved with early onset as opposed to, I want to call it normal onset, but later onset when people in their 80s, 90s, things like that. And caregivers face unique challenges, right? May have to go to work. So sometimes you have to quit work to help. And sometimes it's the opposite. You have to go to work in order to pay for the caregiving. So you may have still children at home and face increased costs raising a family, right? Luckily, my brother and I were out of the house. I was in school, my brother was working. But again, there's some people who still have young children and that's how they have to raise. And that's especially difficult for someone dealing with a parent with Alzheimer's than dealing with young children to raise. It's an especially difficult situation. They may no longer able to save children's education or family expenses, right? They originally had a plan to pay for college for the children, but now they have to pay for the caregiving, and maybe the children have to take up bigger loans or may not go to the school you dreamed or thought about having them go otherwise. You may still have mortgages, car payments, loans, and debt, right? Because sometimes people take out a 30+ year mortgage on a house thinking, oh, I'll work for those 30 years and I'll be able to pay along the way. And then when you're no longer able to work, those mortgage payments are no longer as feasible to make as they were before. The resources available to support people 65 or older. Again, the less, because when you're younger, you may not be as eligible, but usually with Medicare, things like that, with the Medicaid, with a dementia diagnosis, you're able to get Medicare a little bit earlier than you would have otherwise. There are especially difficult situations for people in the LGBTQ community. Why? Because they're more likely to be single. They're not less likely to be married, and they're less likely to have children. So unfortunately, they're more likely to be what we call like alone agers or elderly or elder orphans. I don't really like that term, but that's what people call them. So a lot of people that are alone don't have anyone to rely on that are suffering through this disease. Right? And someone suffering this disease is eventually going to need someone to help with their finances, help pay their bills, help make financial decisions. So it's one of those things that hits these LGBTQ community particularly difficult because they don't have the natural person to be there, right? They may not have the spouse, they may not have the children to be there to help them make the financial plans and make the decisions when they need it. Then, of course, somebody with low income, it's very difficult for them, right? Because they don't have the ability to support themselves. They don't have the ability to pay for someone to handle their finances for them necessarily, or be able to pay for care out of pocket. And they're the ones that are more likely to have caregiver stress and may not, but and things like that. That being said, they are probably more likely to qualify for government benefits such as Medicaid to pay for the care at home when they need it. So benefits of early planning. So for the caregiver, knowing a person's wishes is especially important. That the earlier you begin, the more you're likely to know what their wishes are for their care, for the finances, things like that. It helps the caregivers be more confident in their decision making, right? So you don't have to guess as to what the person would have wanted. You know this is what they would have wanted, how they want it to be done. Knowing how to handle financial issues and pay for care, and less chance of making costly, unwise decisions. And then I also add an additional one for Medicaid planning. So in order to qualify for Medicaid, because Medicaid is the number one payer of long-term care, and I'm speaking this is generally for New York, pay for number care for nursing homes and also for care at home. A lot of people don't know that Medicaid pays for home care in New York State. Great program. But in order to qualify for Medicaid, oftentimes you have to plan in advance. You have to either create trust, fund trust, do things in advance in order to get through what's a 5-year look-back period for nursing home, or just a few month look-back for home care Medicaid. But it's going to change to 2.5 years and pretty soon for community Medicaid. So it's one of those things that when you plan ahead, you're able to potentially protect more assets and be able to qualify for Medicaid to pay for the care either at home or in a nursing home.
My mother, by putting plans in place early, that really helped me because it gives me a sense of confidence that I'm doing the things that she really wants to be done. It allows me to not have to worry about decisions that I make because my mother has already laid out the plan. She's stated her wishes, and my role is really to execute those plans. I have found that making decisions for my own situation can often be difficult. And so it's even harder to make decisions, especially when it comes to medical decisions, financial decisions. To have that responsibility of making those decisions for someone else can be very, very difficult. So in that my mother was so prepared and had laid out financial plans and really had a structure around her life, that has really allowed me to be less anxious as I perform the caregiving role.
One of the benefits of putting financial plans in place for caregivers is simply peace of mind. Oftentimes we have a lot of anxiety and fear about the unknown. How long is the disease going to last? What are the care needs going to be? When we think of all of those things that we might be apprehensive about, and we put plans in place for if this happens, here's how we'll handle it. And we really think through, here's what's typical with the disease, here's what I need to be thinking about, and here's my plan for that. It can be such a gift to the whole family because people can settle in and focus on, here's what I need to focus on today, here's what I need to think about right now, without the weight of the what ifs hanging over their head.
Right. Benefits of early planning for the individual, right? The ability to share exactly what they want to help and help make decisions, right? Reassurance others know their wishes and to follow them. I mean, there's a lot of comfort in knowing that other people are on your team and aware as what you want and how to do it. And really having legal financial plans in place. And that's one of the things that I feel like that what I do in my job is most fulfilling is that I help people, I relieve them a lot of the issues that they had or a lot of the worries that they had to say, you could pay for this. Like your plan is you have plans in place. You'll be able to pay for this. Qualify for government benefits that could pay for this. So that really is a huge relief to people, and that's one of the more fulfilling parts of my job.
One benefit of planning early for the person with the disease is that they get to have their say. They get to say, here is how I want things to play out. If there's ever a time when I can't live alone or when I need this kind of care, here's how I'd like that to happen. Here's who I want to be making decisions on my behalf if I can't make them for myself. So they get to have their say. In addition, they get to make choices about how they live their life, what they do now and in the months and years to come, with this additional knowledge of, hey, I've got this disease and here's what I can expect. And so a lot of people tell us that they choose differently, and they choose differently from each other. I talked to one person with Alzheimer's who said, you know what, I want every day to be regular. I want to work in my flower beds. I want to play with my grandkids. I want to have lunch with a friend. I just want lots of great regular days. I've talked to other folks with dementia diseases who said, I want to do the things I've been looking forward to. I want to take some big trips, or I want to do some really special things with the people I'm close to. So it's not the same for everybody, but the person with the disease gets to make choices and gets to live life more on their terms.
All right, next conversations about finances. Right, talking about money can make people feel anxious or uncomfortable and making it hard to know how to start the conversation, which is a very difficult conversation for a lot of people. A lot of people are very private about their finances. They don't be able to know what they own, how they own it, what it's worth. But unfortunately, in order to have people help you, like you need to help them, right? They need to know these things. And I know it's very uncomfortable for people, but if they don't know what you own, how you own it, where it's located, what it's worth, it's very difficult to come up with a plan to protect assets and get care in place. Right, starting a discussion, right? One first step, write down goals of what documents you will need to review or discuss, right? Write down the goals, like you want to discuss housing today, or you want to discuss your investments, or and what documents it says. You want to talk about your trust, you want to talk about your power of attorney, you want to talk about your tax return. It's very good to start easy, right? The easier conversation, the better. So we make the hard conversations for a different day once you get the pattern of doing meetings, so that the person will get comfortable having people around them and discussing things before you get to the more, I guess, detailed or personal things. Include trusted family members or close friends. I'll also add add members of your care team. Your care team would be people like geriatric care managers, accountants, lawyers, financial planners, people that are going to be involved in the person's financial care are important to have involved in any sort of meeting or as part of the team. Choose a calm day and a quiet place. So it's better to choose. I think it's very individual to the loved one. I mean, I speak to my father. He had sundowning. Well, son, he had Alzheimer's, whereby when the sun goes down, his level capacity went down as well. So if you talk to him, maybe see 10 in the morning after a nice big breakfast, his name was Jerry. He's like, hey, Jerry, like, well, do you know who you are? Do you know where you are? Do you know what's going on? You might even be able to have a full-on conversation with him about what's going on in the world at 10 a.m. But then at, say, 8 p.m., when it's pitch black outside, and let's say in the winter, he may not know who he is, where he is, or what's going on. So you would not want to have a night meeting with people like my father. You'd want to have it around 10 a.m. when he's at his best. So you want to make sure that you choose a calm, quiet part of the day, but also when they are at their best. Encourage honesty, where you may want not want the person to feel bad. I mean, obviously you want to make things as nice as possible, not to be mean, but you need to be honest to say these are things that need to be discussed and here's why. And next thing, don't rush, take your time. A lot of people with dementia and Alzheimer's, they don't necessarily understand things right away. They may need multiple explanations, or they may need to be reminded of things, or to write things down for them. So, and a lot of people get frustrated with that, but it's important that your loved ones and care team not get frustrated, to work with the person at their level and do their best to get them involved. All right, some additional tips. You know, it can be hard to ask for help managing money, especially someone living with dementia, right? Because a lot of people are neurotic in general, but it gets even more so with Alzheimer's dementia. They really feel like someone's going to take advantage of them, someone doesn't have their best interest. So just to be understanding of that, it can be very difficult for them to even ask for help. Ask the person's wishes. You want to know what they want. Don't judge a person for the decisions, right? I have a lot of clients that when we have a meeting together, they say things that they didn't expect their parent to say. Like they say, they may have thought that they wanted one child to be the power of attorney, but they actually decided they want a different child. Or they may have thought they wanted to stay in the home, but they said, no, I'd rather be in a facility. It surprises them, but you have to go with what their wishes are because they still have the ability to express it. But it's important to go with their wishes while they have the ability to communicate it. And if the person has difficulty communicating, speak in short sentences, pause, make sure they understand what's being said. So when I as you could probably tell, I speak pretty quickly. But when I spoke with my father, I really had to slow it down. I purposely had to consciously think about it, slow down the speed of my speech in order to make sure that he understood it. If the conversation becomes stressful, stop, try again later, and try to end on a positive note, right? You want to make sure that the meeting went positively as possible so that they'd be more willing to have another meeting like that in the future.
Advice I'd have for other caregivers if the conversation about finances doesn't go well at first is to keep trying. It took a while for my mom to come around, and I was exasperated. I would try to catch her at a good moment, and sometimes she'd give me a little tidbit here or there, so it might take time to just pull it all together. It's sort of trying to understand the moment if you're having a good time. What I did also was to bring up friends. My mother was very empathetic. So if I'd say, oh, remember so-and-so? They had a situation with their mom or dad or family member where something happened and the person didn't know what to do or they didn't have understanding about it. So that was really hard on them. She'd say, oh, really? And I say, yeah, see, that would help me if we talked about that kind of thing, and that would usually get her. So in my case, that empathy is what I would kind of try to use for her to open up more, but continuing to do it, catching on a good day. That was key because it took time and it was piecemeal. Small victories, just get as much as you can over time and keep at it, because there usually will be a window where you can kind of break through, or in some cases it might be someone else has to talk to them.
And next we'll go over avoiding financial abuse and fraud. Where financial abuse can occur in any setting by any person. It often occurs not just with strangers, but loved ones as well. Often take advantage of the person with the disease. Individuals living with dementia have greater risk of becoming victims, right? Their guards aren't up or don't have the ability to understand what's going on. So there's a greater ability and chance for them to be taken advantage of. They may not even remember the abuse or report their abuse, right? They may have been called by someone, a telemarketer, bought something, and when you confront them, they may not even remember. Or they also don't report the abuse, right? The abuse might be by a good friend of theirs, and they're embarrassed, or they still like the person. Or it might be that it's a child, and they don't want to call the police or call the authorities about abuse from a child, even though it's a very bad thing to do to abuse a parent. But there's a lot of people just don't want to act on the abuse that's in their lives. And they may struggle to make good financial decisions, right? They may go to Amazon and buy everything that Amazon suggests on the screen. And they may go to the grocery store and buy lots of things that they've never eaten before, but think that they would like to eat. So it's very difficult for them to make good financial decisions when they still have the ability to spend money.
People living with dementia are more susceptible perhaps to fraud and financial abuse than other people because they have a disease that's attacking their brain. And so their ability to solve problems, to think about things logically, to have insight may be impaired, and they may be able to be tricked by people they trust or people who seem nice or seem trustworthy in a way that they wouldn't have been at an earlier time.
All right, signs a person may be having problems with money. Unopened bills, right? There might just be lots of envelopes piling up in the mail. Electricity or gas gets shut off because they're not paying their utility bills. Unusual large purchases, things they wouldn't have bought otherwise when they had more capacity. Multiple of the same items are things they don't need, right? They may have forgotten they purchased soap, so they keep ordering more soap. Or things they don't need. I mean, I see this a lot. My dad started purchasing things early on that he never would have otherwise. Things that didn't make sense for him or his lifestyle. Repeat donations to telemarketers. By telemarketers, they are the successful ones. That they put it in their notes and they call again, and someone else called them, and it's really terrible that way. And missing money or unexplained bank withdrawals. Right? They may just lose the money. Someone may have taken it from them, they don't remember, or someone may have gotten access to the bank cards and withdrew a lot of money, unbeknownst to them. So there's a lot of signs to look out for in terms of finding out if they're being taken advantage of. So lowering the risk of abuse and fraud, agree to a spending limit on credit cards. So you get the different credit cards, or even I recommend usually like a debit card, and limit the amount of damage someone can do. So for my dad, when he went out, we had it so that he'd only have the ability to spend maybe $500 at once. So someone he couldn't spend thousands of dollars. So we made 500, then later on made it 200. Want him to basically be able to do things like go to the grocery store or buy something online that he really needs or wants, but not be taken advantage of by somebody and spending a lot of money, or not taking advantage of somebody else, but in doing things that would hurt him or hurt us. Have a separate account for recreational spending. Set up auto pay. This is very important for people that may not have another one to rely on. Having auto pay set up for credit cards and things like that, making sure that electricity doesn't get cut off, but the credit cards are paid, and you're able to get your Ubers and things to go to the doctors and stuff like that. Request electronic bank and credit card statements. This is also good so that in case your loved one, you're able to get and have access to bank accounts, you're able to give other people the ability to see what you're spending, so that your caregiver, your agent or private attorney, can see what you're spending and see what you're doing, and that's important as well. Sign up for do not call lists, so that would help with any sort of telemarketers, hopefully. And ask credit card companies to stop sending balance transfer checks. They don't really do that too much anymore. They sometimes do, but ask them not to do that anymore.
So one of the things that I did, my father was very proud. He really didn't want to admit that he had Alzheimer's. So I wanted him to be able to continue to feel good about himself. So I actually set up a checking savings account for him that was joint with me. Because again, I had power of attorney, so I could move things around a bit. I made sure that he always had $200 in that account. Everything else was protected, and he really didn't have access to it anymore. But he didn't know that because he still had that $200. A couple of years into his diagnosis, he actually had somebody stop at his home. He was outside working in his yard. They came by, a couple, old car, and pulled up to the driveway. They had a child with them and said their child was ill. And they said they needed money for health care for this child. My father was always very generous as he became older and as he became more impaired with Alzheimer's. He became more generous. And so his inclination was to help this couple. They took him to the credit union. They asked him to withdraw all of his funds. So he did. He had access to that $200 that he knew about, and he gave it to them. They left him there in the parking lot and he walked home. So it was really awful that that happened to him, but his money was protected because of the safeguards that we had put up. Everything else was still there, and I was able to replace that $200. So we tried very hard to do everything we could to protect him financially, but also to make sure that we didn't take away his sense of self-esteem.
All right, identifying legal and financial needs. Right, look at income and spending. Write down cash in, cash out, so you have an idea of how much money you have to spend and how much money you're spending. See if there are places to cut back on spending and build up savings for unexpected care costs. Take inventory of assets and debts. Assets are things that you own. So things like your house, your car, bank accounts, stocks, 401ks, IRAs, life insurance, annuities, those are assets. And things like your debts are like your mortgage, your credit card, your loans, line of credits, things like that. Identify the cost of care, right? Think about the medical treatment, drugs, personal care supplies, adult day services, in-home care, or residential care facilities or nursing homes. Right, you have to identify what the expenses will be as best as you can, knowing that will go up over time. Right, making arrangements for ongoing responsibilities, right? Having someone in place, whether it's a co-trustee of a trust, agent or private attorney, or just a co-owner on something, or just giving someone access, giving someone the ability to pay bills, arranging to for benefit claims, arranging to apply for Medicaid, things like that, making investment decisions, or preparing tax returns. Right, look at common funding sources, right? You can look at your personal resources, like your assets, and how much money you get in and get out. So you look at your Social Security, pensions, required minimum distributions for IRAs, 401ks. Then federally funded sources, right? There's Medicare, there are veteran benefits, Social Security, disability, and then the state funded resources like Medicare, Medicaid, things like that. They'll qualify or pay for long-term care, either at home or in facility. Right, tips for legal planning. Legal planning makes sure a person can designate a trusted family member or friend to make decisions for them. But it's also important for legal planning because the sooner you plan, the more assets you can protect. So you could use trust or other sort of techniques to protect assets for your loved ones or for your children or whatever you want, or be able to protect your home where you live and still qualify for care you need. So legal planning, again, the earlier the better. That's important to have loved ones or trusted people in place in order to help you with those plans. It's important to review and update these documents, right? Look what you have. Do you have a will? Do you have a trust? Do you have a private attorney healthcare proxy in place? And if you don't, you should probably have them, right? Making sure you have someone named to make healthcare decisions for you if you're unable to, make financial decisions for you. Have a trust set up to help you with any assets owned by the trust to help manage them, to plan for it in more capacity. So it's one of those things that, and it's a plan, and right, and as your plans change, your documents might need to change too. So if something happens to your caregiver, right? So the caregiver passes away before the loved one does, they may need to update these documents in order to reflect their current situation. But there are lots of resources out there, legal, financial, and otherwise, in order to find attorneys or professionals to help you with this sort of thing. I'm happy to be a resource for legal-wise and financial, or a lot of financial advisors and other people. So if you're looking for somebody, even if it's not a state I'm licensed in, I'm happy to be a resource as well for anybody listening. Creating a backup plan. Right, talk with friends and family about who could take over difficult caregiving responsibilities. Consider assigning responsibilities to more than one person, right? You might have co-executors, co-agents in a power of attorney. So in case something happens to one person, there'll be another one to step in. Doesn't need a trust or backup. All right, keep an up-to-date medical information, right? So in case there's a medical emergency, Your caregivers have the ability to say what medications you're on, things you might be allergic to, your doctor's contact information. So it's really important to have that as well for any caregiver. Right, take care of your health. I mentioned this before, that if the caregiver's not there, lots of plans don't work. So make sure the caregivers visit the doctors, they stay well physically active. Looking at respite care, other support services. So respite care is something where you could drop off or have the person with dementia and Alzheimer's go to a facility for a short period of time, a few days, a couple of weeks. That gives the caregiver the ability to take some time off, whether they go on vacation, go see doctors, go to the gym, just some time to recharge. So when they go back on duty for caregiving, they're in a much better position. Learn to ask for and accept help from others. A lot of people are very independent and they feel very uncomfortable asking for help. But it's one of those things they need to get over that in order to help take care of the person and build a care team, right, for the caregiving responsibilities. But the team, not just of physical care, but for financial care, including things like lawyers, financial planners, accountants, geriatric care managers, having a team in place to help the loved one who's suffering with this and to make sure that their plans are adhered to and respected. Right, the Alzheimer's Association is always there for you. It's a 24-hour, 24/7 hotline, number 800-272-3900. They have great resources. They have great support groups. They have care managers in place to help you. So feel free to reach out to the association whenever you have questions or whenever you need help and what resources you might need, because they'll be able to help you and lead you in the right direction. All right, so I appreciate everyone that came out today. I'm happy to stay a little bit after and answer some questions people had, whether they write it down or they want to speak now. Again, I'm happy to be a resource for anyone here today. I'll put my information back in the chat area, so if anyone reaches out to me. But June, feel free to go ahead and start reading any of the questions anybody has or any comments. I'm happy to respond.
Absolutely. So our first question that we got was, if my father already had a will before his diagnosis, do we have to update it? / are we able to update it after his official diagnosis?
You can do it after diagnosis, but it really depends on how developed or how far deep into Alzheimer's he is. I'd say if he's still early stages, probably can. And it doesn't worry, as long as he knows who he is, what his assets are, who he's appointing, who he's giving the assets to in his will, he'll probably do a new will. But if he's in the latter part of the middle stages or in the late stages, probably not. So, but it's really case by case scenario. And again, it might depend on the day to day. It might depend on the time of day, right? My dad in middle stages, probably at 10 a.m., would have had the capacity to do legal documents, but 10 p.m., no way. So capacity can be very fluid in the sense that you'll want to make sure they meet with the attorney and sign their documents at a point where they do have capacity.
Great. Thank you, Michael. We have one in the Q&A section. So number one is, can you describe the changes to Medicaid look back?
Sure. So right now, in terms of qualifying for nursing home Medicaid, there's a 5-year look back. So they look at all resources of the person and their spouse, if they have a spouse, when they apply for they apply for Medicaid. They have too many assets or too high of an income, they may not qualify. But for home care Medicaid, there's really kind of a 1-month look back right now. They only look, as long as you qualify with the assets and income in the month you apply, you're able to qualify. They may ask for 3 months of statements. And they can see maybe last month you had a few $100,000 in your name, but now you created a trust and funded it, and now you no longer have that in your name, and that's okay. But it's going to eventually be a 2.5-year look back. Officially, that 2.5-year look back period is supposed to start March 31st of this year. Unofficially, Department of Social Services and Medicaid in New York has already said it's going to be probably they're going to push it back to sometime in 2025. But that's why I tell my clients not to wait too long. That if you want to put a plan in place, let's do it before March 31st, so that you would not need to worry about the look back period for home care Medicaid.
Great, thank you. Next question is, what is a reverse mortgage and would that have an impact on Social Security?
That's more of so a reverse mortgage is when you take out money against the value of a home. right? Does that affect Social Security? I would ask a financial planner that question as opposed to a lawyer, but it might.
Right. And we have another question. We had an experience where my father faced a scam and took around $200. How can I be added to his bank account if I can be, so that I can monitor his money? I called the credit card and said that it can only be done by my father, but whenever I put him on the phone, he says he's able to deal with it himself.
It's a tough situation, right? You need him to comply, or you need him to sign a power of attorney giving you authority to act on his behalf. So that's probably the way to go. Because I mean, that's a problem I had with my dad too. If you asked him, "Hey, Dad, can you handle your finances?" Of course I can. Can you bathe yourself? Of course I can. And he couldn't, but he was too proud to say otherwise, even to total strangers who he never met before, would never see again. He felt the sort of pride to say that I can take care of myself, I can do these things. So that's why you really need to get a powerful power of attorney done by an attorney who knows how to, all the modifications and things that do it properly, so that you can go to all the credit cards, all the banks, and get your name on it, and so that you're able to have access to it and help them with things.
I think you kind of answered this question already. So the follow-up question to that was, do I do the power of attorney with an elder law attorney?
Yeah, I'd go to a trusted states and elder law attorney who knows what they're doing, has experience in long-term care planning. Because when you do it yourself, you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it properly. You're not going to have the powers you need, the modifications you need to put in, and you're just delaying the inevitable. So, I mean, again, people ask me like, could I do a legal plan? Could I do a will by myself or trust myself? Sure, you can, but I wouldn't. Can you do foot surgery on yourself? Sure, I wouldn't recommend it. Same thing. You hire professionals for a reason to help you with these things so that you avoid problems.
Okay. Yes, and then Karen just had a comment. Power of attorney are requisite.
Yeah, for that exact reason, because people are, if you go them the bank, they're just because the teller or the bank representative is like, hey, loved one, can you do these things yourself? Do you really need help? They're gonna say, no, I'm fine, but they do need help and they don't want to admit it. So that's why you need the power of attorney. So to go to the bank, go to financial institutions, process it, get your name on the account, get your name as power of attorney, so they can really act on
There any other questions? So Natalia, I know you did a little bit about PSS at the end, so maybe you could do that. And if there's any other questions, maybe we can answer them afterwards.
Sure. And just as a reminder, you will also be getting Michael's contact information that he shared in a follow-up email. So just be on the lookout for that email either at the end of the day today or first thing tomorrow morning. But as many of you know, we offer these services for caregivers, and I'll also follow up on that email with the information that I provided for you all to go ahead and feel free to give us a call if you need any assistance. We can also answer your questions in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking caregivers. So I don't know if there are any additional questions.
Well, just another quick comment. I work in a law firm and modeled my POA after one I found and adapted as best as I could.
Look, you want to try it yourself, go for it. I think it's worth a little bit of time and effort and money to have a professional do it. But look, if you do it, it works for you, then more power to you.
Yeah, I just see a lot of also very informative. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. This is great. Thank you, Alzheimer's Association PSS.
There's
Thanks,
one
thanks.
more.
Oh, I'm sorry, Natalia. What were you saying, Natalia?
I'm sorry. There's one more that just came in. It says many banks want their own POA. Can you explain to the audience?
Yeah, the banks prefer it, but a general New York State power of attorney they have to accept. So look, if you have the time and ability to do one specifically for the bank, but there's no harm. But let's say the person lacks capacity, all you have is the New York State one done by a licensed attorney who knows what they're doing. That is sufficient. They will accept it. Usually what they do is they take it, they send it up to their legal department, wait a couple days, and then tell you it's accepted. But they do have to accept a New York statutory executed power of attorney.
Wonderful.
Great.
Well, in the interest of time, Michael, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And also to June, thank you guys both for spending your morning with us, and to our attendees. Like I said, please feel free to reach out to us. I'll also be sending the information that Michael shared with us. And you know, the information, the contact information for the Alzheimer's Association. They are a great organization. They are our dear friends. We really appreciate the work and the mission that they do. So remember, we're here for you. You're not alone in this, and we want to walk alongside you all. So thank you again to everyone for coming, and we'll see each other next time. All right. Have a great afternoon, guys.
All right, thanks everybody. It's been a pleasure.
I'll send the follow-up documents too with this program to you and tell your to send out to everyone who attended.
Perfect. So be on the lookout for that email. Thank you guys so much. Have
Thank
a
you,
great
everyone.
afternoon.
All right, take
Bye.
care.
I can tell you.
All right, bye-bye.